Okay, we're live.
Okay. Welcome, everyone, to our school committee meeting. Let me just go over who's on. So we have myself, we have Member Donovan, Member Green, Member Allen, Member McFadden, Member Pasillo, Member Monroe. Our administrators, we have our superintendent, Jim Aronakis. We have Director of Administration, Bob Ross. Let's see, we have Dr. Marie Ahern, our curriculum director, and Jeremy Taylor, our Director of Technology. I think I got everybody. Okay. So we'll call this meeting to order. I just want to go over a little housekeeping for members of the public if there's any on. So if anyone would like to speak when we get to open forum or on an agenda item, you can raise your hand or use the *9 if you're on the phone. *6 mutes and unmutes you. Okay. All right. We will go to the open forum. Comments must be directed to the chairperson of the school committee, who may limit or terminate a discussion. No comment should address personnel, litigation, or negotiations as restricted by the open meetings regulations. The school committee cannot take action or vote on topics introduced that are not reflected on the agenda. If there is anyone from the public on the meeting, if you'd like to speak, you may raise your hand now. Okay, I don't see anybody. Okay, we will jump to consent agenda.
Okay, under consent, we have the approval of the regular meeting minutes from December 8th. We have an athletic appointment for a vacancy in boys varsity soccer. We have 2 leaves of absence. One is from an athletic position and one is extending a leave of absence for a teacher assistant. We have a non-certified retirement at the end of the school year that's been announced. The resignation from the JV soccer position, that's the individual that's moving to the varsity position. We have a retirement letter from a certified teacher. She's on a leave of absence for this year and she's officially retiring, officially retired, effective December 29th, but there's no impact for us because the person has been on a leave for the year. We have our monthly bills and 3 homeschool approvals for the remainder of the current school year.
Okay, anybody have any questions or would like anything pulled? Everybody's good? Okay. So if we can have a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved, Donovan.
And do we have a second?
Second.
Member Green seconds. Okay. As a discussion. Everybody's good? Okay, I'll take a roll call vote. Member Donovan?
Aye.
Member Green?
Aye.
Member Allen? Diane, you're muted.
*6, Diane.
She's joined via computer. She needs to click the unmute button in the bottom left corner.
Yep. Diane, you're not on video either, so I can't see your face. If you want to, oh, I see you unmuted.
Okay. Aye.
Okay, thank you. Member McFadden?
Aye.
Member Pasillo?
Aye.
And Member Monroe?
Aye.
Okay, and I'm an aye. Motion carries. Okay, let's see. We have some correspondence. We have a communication from the Rhode Island Department of Education School Building Authority. We have school committee organizational assignments, and we have the discipline reports for the schools. Does anyone have any questions or comments on the correspondence?
I did have a question on the discipline, just a general question since I
Yep.
haven't seen these numbers before. Are you seeing an uptick at all or any difference than what we have historically seen?
There's actually fewer disciplinary infractions this year, far fewer. And part of that has to do with the fact that we have a number of kids that are not in the building at all, who are on distance learning. But kids have been relatively fantastic since the school year started, despite everything that's going on.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Everybody's good? Okay. We will go to the 2020-21 budget projection.
You want to take this, Bob?
Yes. Again, the expenses are within what we would expect for this time of year. You'll note that on the revenue side, the upper part of the report, I haven't really changed the projected revenues too much, although we know there has been some changes to them. I was really waiting for the state aid, which we know that's been reported and it's reflected in here. But some of the other things, the miscellaneous revenue and the CTE and the Medicaid, I just wanted to get some history before I start my projection on that. That will be coming in the next report. For the expense side, again, it's been really kind of an odd year in that, with the normal typical movement of people as addressed in employees in the enclosed, in the consent agenda, you can see that people move in and out, ask for leave of absences, take different types of leave. That impacts wages and benefits, but they're holding pretty steady. And the purchase of the 54, 5, and 6 series, those are a little, they're proven to be a little more positive, only because it seems like every expense we have is kind of offset by the limited in-person kind of activity we have going on. So it's kind of been a really hard to get a trend on what's happening. And of course, the release of stimulus, opportunities for us, the superintendent, the treasurer, myself, we constantly monitor that. And those have all been positive, helping us offset the negatives, which is you go along, you think you're in a bad position in one area, and then you get a stimulus and you work through that and you're like, okay, that's going to offset. So overall, we moved from the previous month a negative, and we've moved to a positive on the expense side this month. So,
And
all
Bob,
good news.
Bob, one other note on December, which was the time for our employees to switch over to the HSA, which was
Right.
part of the last round of negotiations, and we had a number of individuals that switched over, which reduced costs. So we continue to see the benefits of the last round of negotiations as people move over to the less expensive option, right?
Yeah, that's a real important point. Thanks, Superintendent Aronakis, for bringing that up. Every time we get to elucidate on that a little bit, new hire, they come on, they're in a traditional healthcare plan because HSAs run on the fiscal year. End of December, January 1, they go from a traditional plan to the HSA, and that immediately has an impact on our premium rate, which of course was part of the negotiation. So that strategy is working out. That's been, for those involved with the negotiation, that's 6 years plus in the making. So we're continue to see the benefit in that. So,
Member McFadden, you have a question?
Bob,
Yes.
Hi. Looking forward into the next budget cycle, that is the budget cycle we're entering. One of the things that we did one of the years to offset our financial challenges is we made a withdrawal from our health fund for a certain amount of money, whatever it was. When did we have to get those requests in? If I remember right, there were date-driven issues with that. Am I mistaken?
No, the healthcare is administered through the WB Community Health, and the request for a withdrawal is mid-March, April. So we'll monitor that as we go through the 22 cycle budget development.
Right. So there is some date-related things that we have to request by, correct?
Correct.
And what did you say? Could we get a more definitive arm around that date in case we need to leverage that?
Yeah.
Because I know we're pushing 3 million. So I just want to know, because I'm not interested in withdrawing a lot, but you know, if we take a little from here and a little from there kind of thing, if we have to.
Yeah, I think I can get the exact date, and even just the notification of a withdrawal just helps the overall operation of the WB, just to kind of anticipate. You know, we have to let them know that we're going to make a withdrawal, and that, you know, the amount will be determined. You know, there's some flexibility there.
Right. I just don't want us to run over the date and then it's either becomes awkward or not a possibility. So if you just keep that in your mind as we're rolling forward with the next year's budget process, which I know we got some challenges there. All right. Thanks.
Okay.
Okay, Member Green?
I have a question that actually popped up from Jim's updates, but it actually is about state aid. So I'm not sure where I should ask the question.
Does it have to do with the budget that we're currently
Well,
in?
it does, because I was curious about the funding, the actual state aid that he had mentioned in his comments that is going to be possibly significantly reduced.
Yep, go ahead, Cheryl.
Okay, so I'm looking at both. So my question was about the free and reduced lunch.
Yeah.
And how that could significantly impact the aid, because they take that into account when they develop the budget, you know, and how much you need. But my question was are you aware that the SNAP benefits in Rhode Island were increased due to the COVID pandemic by 15%? And we are one of 3 states that had that increase given to us. And SNAP is directly related to RIDE. I mean, if you go to the website, you can actually get to the RIDE Department of Education Nutrition area. So my question is that something that you might have argued, that why are they getting that increase, but it isn't going to, you know, equate to the schools? Like, you should not get punished with that, in my opinion, for something that was uncontrollable.
Right. So the budget that we're currently looking at, the one that Bob just reported on, is the existing school year, the current school year, FY21. And this budget was developed pre-pandemic, so we didn't have any impact as a result of the enrollment, kids moving to homeschool, free and reduced lunch. So in the current,
Right, but they can't take it into an account just because of the nature of the.
Yeah, so that's what I'm going to say. We know, and it's not just Exeter West Greenwich, every single school district has been tracking what's happening with kids that are leaving for homeschooling, families making that decision temporarily as a result of the pandemic, and then families that are just not filling out the free and reduced lunch forms, which is what we're required to have on file in order to count those individual students for that variable of the formula. So we have actually talked about exactly what you're saying, and you know, the fact that we did the right thing by moving forward with qualifying as a provider of free meals for our kids, given the situation, and as a result of that, it could come back to bite us in terms of the funding formula, us and every other district. So we have had multiple conversations with the governor's office, with the commissioner, and with legislature. We are hopeful that there will be a decision to hold districts harmless, given the circumstances and the way that it impacts the funding formula. But we have not received any definitive answers on that yet. But yes, we've argued every possible point, including the ones that you just mentioned.
Okay, I wasn't sure.
I have a meeting, or RISA officers have a meeting tomorrow morning with the commissioner, our monthly meeting. It's on our agenda again, because, we're all in the middle of budget development, and that is significant, right? I mean, they did release their projections for next year, and I included them in the binders that were sent out. The projections are basically level funded, but there's a clause that's written right on there that we could be impacted by the variables of enrollment and free and reduced lunch. So it's not a definite. It's definitely something that we're watching.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, I don't see any other hands raised. I think we're good with that. We'll move on to our monthly status reports. Any questions or comments on those? Member Green?
I'm sorry, I had another question with the status report.
No, go ahead, Jim.
It's for Jim. It's about the testing, the random testing of the athletes and the students.
Yep.
I know it's not mandatory, and I'm aware that there is a form for parents, like a consent form. I didn't see it on the website. Will that be available for parents to download or for them to have?
Yeah, we actually just solidified the date for the on-site one-day event for our junior senior high school. That's going to be held on the 28th of January. We got the consent forms that.
Jim, hold on. Diane, can you mute yourself, please?
That's me.
Thank you. Okay, go ahead, Jim.
We actually got the sample RIDO forms just this week. So when I send out the communication with the details of our voluntary testing plan, I'm going to include the forms that parents can fill out. We're also going to provide the option of filling the form out online so that we can easily collect and sort the information by school and by grade level.
But it does require parental consent, correct?
Correct. That's correct.
And also, I'm aware that they do let you know that if you previously tested positive, or if you actually had it asymptomatically and were not aware, that you could still test positive for up to 90 days.
Yep.
Which is a little bit of a concern for me because, these kids have been waiting and waiting to participate and get back to school and do the athletics especially. And it's almost like a needle in a haystack kind of thing. Like if they test positive and they're not infectious, because that's a possibility as well, now they're going back into quarantine and now they're missing out some more.
So I'm not sure that that's going to happen. That's one of the things that RIDO has actually, we just heard about it today, released some additional guidance on that if you tested positive, there's a 90-day window where you're not required to follow any quarantining rules because they assume that you're not able to infect others. We believe that if you have tested positive within the last 90 days, that that we would not include you in the sampling for testing because it doesn't make sense to do so.
Right. My point was people that have had it, there's so much of the population that don't even know they've already been exposed that right. I'm just thinking about the kids here.
Yep. I got you.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Member Monroe?
I had a question related to that as well, but it was for all of the students being tested. I noticed that the plan is to have the nurses do the testing. Have they been, or will they, by the time we start this, have been vaccinated? Do you know?
Yeah, they've all gone for their first their first shot and they're scheduled for their second one. That's why we selected the date at the end of the month so that they would all be completely vaccinated by that point.
Perfect. I also had a question related to another item on here, and it was about the projections for the Council 94. And there was a mention of planned retirements. I know that there were 2 retirements slated for discussion today, but are we expecting more by the end of this year?
Which report are you looking at, Andrea? Just so that,
It's a bullet. It's the second to last bullet point on the first page of the update.
of my update?
Yes.
Oh, I see. Yeah. So we don't ever know for sure. We are aware right now of one that was approved this evening, that came to the school committee this evening. I have not heard of any other retirements. So I'm not sure.
Okay.
We'll continue to monitor. And in terms of certified staff, we had the one that was on the agenda this evening, which was not unanticipated. And it's an individual that was on a leave of absence this year. We had one that was approved, I want to say 2 meetings ago or 1 meeting ago. And that's all that I have heard at this point as well. But, people will send their notices in at any given time. There's not really a deadline for it. And as they come in, we build any savings that could be projected out into the budget. And, that's why we just keep reporting on changes throughout the several months of this process.
Okay.
I just don't know of, at this point, there's not large numbers that are out there that we're expecting and anticipating.
Okay. I also had another question related to CTE, but I don't know if this is included in the correspondence or a later section. The monthly status.
Did you have that in your correspondence, Marie? Anything on CTE?
I do.
Yeah.
I did provide an update in my correspondence.
Okay, go ahead, Andrea.
Okay. I noticed that we're not able to move forward with applications for CTE this year for next year. And I was just wondering, what are our current approved CTE offerings that we currently have?
We have 3 currently. We have agriculture science, we have computer science, and we also have art 2 and 3D design, right? Is that yeah.
Okay. Those were the 3 I was familiar with. I wasn't sure if we had others. And what were do we have some that we were planning on proposing for this year that we're not allowed to move forward with at this time?
Yes.
Yeah, we were ready with 3 strong applications. 2 of the applications we had taken we had submitted last year and did not receive approval, but RIDE provided some great feedback and we incorporated all of that feedback. We actually went even beyond what they asked for. And we had a 3rd one that was strong, also strong, that was going to be submitted. So we were very, very disappointed to hear that RIDE was not going to open the application process.
Okay. What were the 3 that we have ready to go for?
Biomedical technology, which we have been chomping at the bit to get approval for. We have a great partnership with Amgen, which is right down the street from us. And they have helped us with the curriculum work for that CTE program. The other one is a culinary program, which is the new one. And then the 3rd one is a music offering that was going to be brought forward.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, everybody else is good? All right. I have, I'm not going to bring it up now. Bob, in your report, you have the mention of the MOA expiring, but let's talk about under 5C. I'll bring up my question. Okay. going to go to new business. We have review and authorize acceptance of proposals for the Westerly Community Credit Union teacher grants. We have the senior high school Exeter West Greenwich Tree Plenish project. Jim, do you have the lead on that?
Yeah, I mean, the what's included in the packet is pretty self-explanatory. These are small grants that are offered on an annual basis from the Westerly Credit Union. We've had a number of our teachers who have written for projects over the past several years that have all been funded. And these are the first two that we have received from our staff for this year. According to district policy, all grant proposals need to come in front of the school committee for approval. And then once you approve, we submit and wait to hear from Westerly on whether or not they were awarded. And then we'll go through the process of, through Tish of implementing the codes and getting that underway. I would expect there to be several others that come in front of you as well as they get submitted during the time frame. Last year we had, I think, 8 proposals that were submitted and 2 of them were awarded. So we never know.
Yep, good. The more the better. Okay, so we'll do one at a time. So if we can have a motion to approve the senior high school EWG Tree Plenish project.
Donovan, so moved.
Do we have a second?
Second. Oh,
Okay, Member Pasillo seconded. Any further discussion? Okay, we'll take a roll call vote. Member Donovan,
Aye.
Member Green,
aye.
Member Allen,
Star 6.
Diane. No, Diane's on Zoom. Diane, I just need you to
I
unmute
hit the
yourself.
unmute.
Oh, yep, you're out. I got you.
Okay. Aye.
Member McFadden,
Aye.
Member Pasillo,
Aye.
Member Monroe.
Aye.
Okay, and I'm an aye. Motion carries. Okay, and then if we can have, I don't know, Jim, do you want to talk on the next one or should we just move ahead to voting?
No, I mean, the first one was a high school club proposal from the Sustainability Club. This one actually comes from our STEAM teacher at Wawalum. She basically submits one every year.
Yeah.
So it's a pretty cool project, STEAM through literature, and again, pretty self-explanatory in the narrative that was submitted.
Yep. Okay, good. All right, so if we can have a motion to approve the Wawalum School STEAM through literature.
So moved.
So moved.
Member Pasillo moved. Do we have a second?
Second.
Member Allen seconded. Okay, any further discussion? Everybody's good. Okay, we'll take our roll call vote. Member Donovan,
Aye.
Member Green,
Aye.
Member Allen,
Aye.
Member McFadden,
Aye.
Member Pasillo,
Aye.
Member Monroe,
Aye.
and I'm an aye. Okay, motion carries.
Thank
Okay,
you.
now, thank you. Now we have some new course offerings. We'll do the first one, AP Government and Politics.
Marie, do you want to take the lead on this?
Yes, thank you. So Department Chair Barbara Wilmot submitted this proposal request for a new course. And we're pretty excited about having the opportunity to provide students with another AP course. She lists, in the first paragraph, you can see that she has very sound reasoning for wanting to offer the course. One thing, and it may be because she forgot one thing she didn't mention, is that AP courses are part of RIDE's accountability system for school districts. And as Superintendent Aronakis talked in a previous school committee meeting, that districts, as well as the high school, and all schools for that matter of fact, receive an accountability rating. So it's a wonderful opportunity for kids. The course will, she has structured it so that the course will not pull students from AP US history. That's something that we always keep in mind when we put forth AP courses or any courses that we don't want kids having to make decisions or struggling to get student enrollment because it competes with other courses going on at the same time. There's a textbook cost, which is modest, and the district has precedent for providing the stipend to train teachers by the College Board for teaching AP courses.
Very good. Any questions?
And
Everybody's
I
good?
think just to reinforce something that Marie stated, and it's right on the application, under the reason section, number 1, RIDE is promoting and ultimately requiring all high schools in Rhode Island to offer AP government by 2024. That's part of their strategic plan. So it will be a requirement. We want to get ahead of it.
Thank you.
Very good. Okay, so if we can have a motion to approve the new senior high course offering AP Government and Politics.
Donovan, so moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Member Green. Any further discussion? Okay, I'll take a roll call vote. Member Donovan,
Aye.
Member Green,
Aye.
Member Allen,
Aye.
Member McFadden,
Aye.
Member Pasillo, Member Monroe,
Aye.
and I'm an aye. Okay, motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And then we have our next course offering, investing in the stock market.
Yeah, so this proposal was submitted by the Business Media and Technology Department. This is a standalone 0.5 credit course. The course is being proposed because there is a high level of student interest in the stock market. The the enrollment is expecting 15 to 20 students. What we especially like about this course is that it will be offered to all students, not just 11th and 12th graders. It's recommended for 11 and 12, but it is offered for all. And that is something that, excuse me, Mrs. Chandler and I advocated for. There are no anticipated financial implications for the course because the teacher will be using materials that are already readily available, and the curriculum has been already developed by another high school, but the curriculum is recognized by a university, Fairleigh Dickinson University. So we would like to offer this course and see if we have enough student interest to run it for the fall.
Very good. Any questions, comments on that course? Everybody's good? Okay, so if we can have a motion to approve the new high school course offering, investing in the stock market.
Aye.
Member Pasillo?
So moved.
No, I need a motion, so moved, thank you. Member Pasillo moved. Do we have a second?
Monroe, second.
Member Monroe seconded. Okay, do we have any further discussion? Okay, we'll take our roll call vote. Oh, hold on, Member Donovan.
Only to say how excited I am about both of these offerings, and I appreciate the initiative. I think that they're both spot on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Member Donovan,
Aye.
Member Green,
Aye.
Member Allen,
Aye.
Member McFadden,
Aye.
Member Pasillo,
Aye.
Member Monroe,
Aye.
and I'm an aye. Good, motion carries. Thanks so much, Marie.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, we'll go on to C, our preliminary 2021-22 budget discussion.
All right, so the packets were were finalized and were made available. I think everybody has picked them up. As is the case for those of you that are returning members of the school committee, you know that the first draft is always, basically just a listing of all of the requests that came to us from all the department heads and all of the department leaders. So, we have not gone through any level of analysis at this point, although we did start that today. And we are confident that in the next round of discussion, which is actually scheduled for next week, that we will report some movement in the right direction for, in terms of what the initial draft states and where we need to head to. So the first draft of the budget is always the worst draft. And in this particular year, I think if you read through the first several bullets of my status report, there are a number of variables that are impacting us that we need to continue to talk through. And that is the projection of state aid based on the variables that we discussed earlier. And in addition to that, we have this significant issue that occurred with the budget process for the current school year, in that, it is what it is. The vote happened. We were level funded based on prior year contribution in a year when the state cut us by $812,000. So we actually are operating this year on a budget that is less than what it was, not just last year, but the year before that. And because of
Jim, can you hold on a second? Member McFadden and member, who's not muted, member Allen, do you guys mind muting, please?
I just muted everybody.
It helps with feedback. Oh, thanks, Jim. Okay, go ahead. No, yeah, thank you. Okay, go ahead, Jim.
So the way that we were able to resolve this year's budget, and again, we resolved it. We are doing what we were asked to do, but the timeline of how that all happened, which was basically at the end of June, just prior to July 1st, the start of the new fiscal year, did not allow us to provide notice to staff for layoffs because there's a timeline that we have to follow state law, June 1st notification. We were not anticipating what happened. So we owned everybody, right? The way that we were able to resolve is that we had some people that requested leaves of absence, mostly because they wanted to stay home with their children based on the pandemic. And some of those positions we just didn't fill. And we had the ability not to fill them because of our reentry plan. They just happened to fall in the right category. So for example, we currently are not offering art at either of our elementary schools because both art teachers took an unpaid leave of absence. And the way that our schedule works is that the kids are receiving their specials classes virtually. And that's why the day is shortened, so we could add the other tier of busing. So there were things that just happened that allowed us to take advantage of the situation and use that as temporary Band-Aid savings to get us through this year. But as we project for next year, we're anticipating that we're going to be able to move back to a more normal schedule where kids go to school for the whole day, and teachers have preparation periods that's contractual, and the preparation periods occur when the kids go to their specials teachers. We need to bring these people back. So they're all built back into the budget. So all the Band-Aids that we use to get us through the current year are things that we need to relook at for next year. So there's a number of variables. And then the third variable, of course, is of all years, this is a year that we see a significant population shift. And based on the way that the charter reads, the schools receive their shares from the towns based on the residency of the children that are enrolled on October 1st of the prior year. So we took the October 1st snapshot, which we've been talking about for the past many meetings. And we see a 2% basically a 2% shift in population that negatively impacts Exeter. And that 2% on a $34 million budget represents a pretty significant sum of money. And I'll show you when I present the screen that the population shift alone accounts for a 5% increase to Exeter, and that's with a level funded operations budget. So we have a number of things that are happening that make this year's budget development cycle kind of impossible, really. We have some ideas. We're going to go through the analysis that we do on an annual basis. It's not good, and we have a lot of things that are working against us. So it will be a very significant challenge, and depending on the direction that the school committee wants to go, we may be having discussions about what programs we need to cut, because I'm going to run out of ideas at this point. That's how bad it is. So that's where we are. Obviously, if you look at the number, which if you just bear with me while I can share my screen, I'll put that document up.
Jim, hold on one second. I just want to let the members know, I do know when your hands are raised, but I want Jim to get through his presentation and I'll acknowledge people. Thanks.
All right, so you can see my screen now?
No.
Okay, let me try that again.
So Jim, I'm not on Zoom or I'm not on visual. So if you could just tell me quickly when you go from one page to the other, what page you're on in the budget, that would be helpful for me.
Yeah, I'm really going to stick to the second page, Mr. McFadden.
Oh, the budget summary. Okay.
Exactly. Yep. So the budget that we are currently working on is under column P of the spreadsheet that's up on the screen, but it says school committee approved on 8/11/20. So that was shortly after the towns voted on their budget for the FY21 school year. We are operating on a $33,136,553, which represented a $725,000 plus reduction from what was originally approved by the school committee. And it's also $251,000 less than the school committee approved budget from the FY20 school year. So we are actually operating this year during the pandemic, during the time of added costs, we're operating under a budget that is $250,000 less than the prior year. So that's what we have in place right now. Based on all of the requests that came forward, the initial draft is a $34,616,726, which represents roughly a $1.5 million increase over the school committee approved budget of August 11th. Now, obviously, those of you that have worked with me over the last 9 years, you know that what you see on draft number 1 is never what you get on draft number 2 or 3 or 4, or it's never what we finally agree on. So that's a number that is the high point. It will only go down from here. But again, this represents every ask from every department across the entire district. It's a 1.48 million increase. Now, in retrospect, it's also a $755,000 increase over what was requested in FY21, and it's a $1.228 million increase over the FY20 school year. So these are just for comparison purposes. What I have done under this column U that we're looking at right now, is I've basically level funded almost all of these lines, and that is backed up by the initial draft of what's being recommended through RIDE to the state government. And again, that's what we use every year to develop this budget. The level funding for us is $4,226,297 from the state. And that is the result of the prior year, $5,038,413, and then subtract out what they reduced last year in the funding formula. So our starting point is the $5,038,413 minus the $812,116, which equals this number for $4,226,297. That's our starting point. According to the initial sheet that was released by RIDE, we are expecting at this point roughly a $17,000 increase, which of course is better than the $812,000 reduction that we were looking at last year. But again, this is prior to any decisions being made about reductions in enrollment for homeschool requests and reductions in the number of children who are qualified for free and reduced lunch status based on the forms that are required to be filled out. So this is something that we need to continue to monitor. I would not stand firm on these numbers at this point, but this is what we have. You'll notice that most of the additional lines have remained consistent. So this is group home aid. That's for the group home that we have in Exeter, consistent. The $160,094 is high cost special education. So we have to go through that process to verify whether that's the case or not. This is English language learner money. This is regional transportation, non-public school transportation. You'll see all of these lines are consistent, right? There's not a change from the prior year. This is what RIDE is projecting out. The changes that we do see, this line here is what the school committee voted on as we were trying to balance the FY21 budget. We voted on, or you voted on, putting some money in from unassigned fund balance to get us through the FY21 school year. Actually, the vote was $320,900. You can see in the highlighted cell that I'm in right now. In actuality, we only need $249,525 of that $320,000 that was voted on. And that is because we are seeing roughly a $72,000 increase in tuitions of kids coming into our school to access the 3 career and tech programs. So we had more kids that signed up after the budget process was completed. We are collecting tuition for those children. None of them are seniors at this point. That we are projecting that they all return. So I was able to increase that, which then reduced the money that the school committee approved for FY21. The school committee has not approved anything yet for FY22, so I put that to 0 because that takes action of the school committee. And then everything else I just kind of moved over. The other change is that our existing capital projects, the one bond that we have remaining that we're paying off, you can see that there's roughly a $17,000 reduction in what we're responsible for. So I've incorporated that. And again, based on the population for FY22, based on the October 1st enrollment numbers, you can see that Exeter went from 46.25% of the population of enrolled children to 48.10%. So that is just shy of a 2% change. And then of course, it goes in the opposite direction for West Greenwich. Now, just for the sake of demonstration, this number 34,616,726 is the initial ask. Again, unanalyzed, there are going to be things that get reduced. But that's where we stand at the current point. And that's how we developed these numbers here. Based on the ask, it would be almost an 11% increase for the town of Exeter, which obviously is not where we're going to end up. And it would be under a 3% increase for West Greenwich, even though they had a reduction in population. But watch what happens when I replace this number with the current year's existing operating budget, okay? So in other words, if we just level fund, that's our operating budget for the current school year. What if we got to that point for FY22? Because the spreadsheet is completely formularized. We come back to the bottom, and here's what happens to Exeter. That's with a level funded operating budget. If I change nothing, Exeter is looking at a 5% increase, and it is almost entirely based on the shift in population, which is extremely significant. A 2% shift in population is extremely significant. So when I say we are working from behind the 8 ball, this is what I'm talking about. If we get to 0, the impact on Exeter is significant. Every increase that we approve will only make that number go up. This is equivalent to, I don't even remember what year it was, we could go back in time, but the year that West Greenwich got hit with the significant increase and they had to get special approval for like a 7.5% or roughly a 7.5% tax increase. It was almost entirely based on population shift. That's what we're looking at for this school year. Let me just make sure that I don't mess this up. I'm going to put that number back in. And it just brings us back to the original. Okay. So again, this is, we're not at the point where we're ready we're ready right now to talk about potential reductions. We haven't even gone through the analysis phase. Again, although we did start that process, we have identified a few things in the budget that were double booked. Some of them are significant. I found a couple of people that ended up in the budget twice. So they, those are the kinds of things that we do first, right? To make sure that the data is 100% accurate and that 2 people didn't enter the same thing at different times. Anything that's a double booking will get eliminated first. We are looking at some additional possibilities as well, and then we'll go through the analysis department by department through individual meetings to look at wants versus needs, because this is not the year where we're going to be able to fund a bunch of wants. This is the year that we need to look at what are the absolute needs. And if it's just a want that we can get away without funding, then those things are going to need to be cut. I mean, given the circumstances of where we are, that's the only way that we can move forward. So that process will occur over the next several weeks. And every time we meet, whether it's next Wednesday, the joint meeting, I will continue to report out on the progress that we've made and where the savings came from as a result of the analysis that we're going through. But at some point in the near future, we're going to need to start talking about where we want to eventually land, and wherever that is, there's going to be a gap between where you want to land and where I currently am. And the way to address the gap is to cut things and cut programs. And that's something that's going to require a vote of the committee. So we have some really difficult discussions and really difficult votes that are coming forward. Strap yourselves in, because we're in for a ride. That's what I have to say.
Thanks, Jim. Okay, I don't think any of this is a surprise to any of us because of what happened last year. Let me take questions. So that Member McFadden has his hand up.
So I'm going to share some observations of things that may have contributed to the population shift. On the same chapter of your budget book, there's a breakdown of population. And in the last obscure line, it's homeschooling, and you'll see that for between 2019 pre-COVID and the year we're in with COVID, that the number of homeschoolings has nearly doubled. So I think, it went from 65 to 117, whether that's a major contributor. you can't ignore that fact when it comes to when we talk about population shift. Metcalf second grade, there's a strange one. In 2019, West Greenwich had 75 children or students in second grade Metcalf. This year, they only have 47. So there's part of the significant shift. So when we say both towns lost kids, but West Greenwich lost a lot more in the school system. I mean, they dropped 70-odd kids. You also see that same drop for West Greenwich when entering into the in the junior high as well. You'll see that the junior high has a drop-off. Overall, it went from 138 last year to 114 this year. So it's another drop of, 24 kids. So,
well, that's a little bit skewed because we're looking at two totally different populations of kids. What we have to look at, if we're looking at grade 2 at Metcalf this year, we have to look at what the grade 1 numbers were the previous year, because that would represent the same group of kids moving from one year.
No, I know what you're saying, Jim, but when you go to first grade, but one of the things that I noticed when you look historically, there is a bump in additional kids that go when you go from first grade to second grade in previous years. So if you looked right under Metcalf for say 18 and 19, they're at 77 and 75, and in first grade, right, it was like 51, 71 in 2018. So there's always a little add-on, which is not unusual because there's a lot of private schools that provide K in first grade.
Right.
It's right. But once you get to second grade, you usually see a bump because the kids are the private schools don't support beyond first grade, so they come in to our school system in second grade. And this year, like I said, what we saw was a pretty significant drop when in the second grade area, 30 kids from West Greenwich. I mean, it's just an observation. Another thing I'd like you guys to keep in mind that I mentioned earlier in the meeting was the WBA. We haven't withdrawn that recently, like in the last 5 years, but I know we have in the past, and some of those withdrawals have been significant, and I'm not exactly sure, but I think it was in support of the budget. So when you come forward in the next meeting with the next budget, with the next round of the budget, you may want to decide for yourselves based on the current WBA levels, which are, I think, bumping up against 3 million, if there's any room for us to take advantage of a withdrawal there. And I mentioned that earlier in the meeting, so I don't want that to roll by. If there is some way of, making a strategic withdrawal from the WBA, the reserve fund, to kind of close this gap, whatever the gap that we're attempting to broach.
Just to respond to that, we will be talking about that when we meet, likely next week. It's not something that we haven't already thought about and already started to have conversations. Make sure that we do this correctly. We also have to be.
Yeah. Okay. But you're breaking up pretty good there for me, Jim. So I think I got the gist that you're considering it. So okay.
Also to clarify, I know, Mr. McFadden, you said a couple of times that grade 2 at Metcalf lost 30 kids in West Greenwich because it went from 75 to 47. But if I look at grade 1, the prior year, there were 51 kids from West Greenwich in grade 1, and now there are 47 in grade 2. So it's not a 30-person shift in grade 2. It's a 4-child shift in the same population of kids that move from grade 1 to grade 2. So we have to look at those numbers, and because we already looked at this as well, part of the big issue is the graduating class. And the graduating class was skewed. So when the graduating class left, there was a larger portion of children that left from West Greenwich, and we did not pick up the same distribution of kids in the earlier grades at Wawaloon, and that created the biggest shift in the proportional share. So
I'm just looking at the numbers going across from 2019 West Greenwich to 2020, Jim. That's another way of looking at it. I know what you're saying, going from first to second grade, but I'm looking just across second grade, Metcalf, 2019.
You're looking at totally different populations of kids. And if you want to look at actual shifting, you have to look at levels from the
Yes, I appreciate that, Jim, for sure. If after my wrongful bonculations, just to get Exeter to 4%, I think you're looking at just an $838,000 cut on the Exeter side to get 4%. But I might be wrong on that calculation. I'll have to check it myself. So I guess, is there any, would you care to, and this is kind of a yes or no question, if it's yes, what is the number you're searching for? So what do you think you're going to finally end up with from the Exeter side? Everything's relative to Exeter at this point.
I don't know. I mean, the budget,
okay.
Yeah, we're so early in the process right now. We haven't gone through the analysis, but that's going to be something that we have to talk about at every single meeting as we get closer to, as we get closer to having to make a decision. There's going to be some decisions that are going to be hard. So I'm not prepared to answer that yet because we haven't gone through the process. We haven't done much in the process.
Yep. So we're meeting with the town councils on the 28th. Is the number that you're going to be providing on the 28th, is that the number you think that we're going to agree upon? Or is that the number, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think the 28th is really, 2 weeks away, basically.
Not very long, yeah.
Not very long. We are not going to be at a place where we're ready to carve into stone what our final ask is going to be. I think of all years, this is a year that a second meeting with the town councils is going to be not recommended, but required. We typically schedule a second meeting if needed. I'm going to suggest that we will absolutely need a second meeting this year. The situation that we're in is pretty severe. And I want to make sure that we're as close to being on the same page as possible before we go to the all-day referendum so that nothing happens like what we experienced this past year. So I'm going to request that a second meeting with the town council get scheduled because we're not going to be done in 2 weeks.
And it's also fair to say that 50% of the increases here are for wages and benefits, right? That's one of the other pages that's on here, right?
Yeah, Bob did create that. As I said, some of the things that we identified already are individuals that were input a couple of different times. For example, I'll give you one example, the retiring teacher that we just approved tonight who's on leave of absence in the existing budget. So she's a top spec teacher with benefits. She's in the existing budget. She needs to be taken out and not replaced. There's a couple of other people that are in the budget twice. And so the duplications will be taken out. There will be a significant change in the requested salary and benefits. And as a result of those changes, Bob will redo that chart. So whatever it currently says, which, if it represents 50% of the increase, that is not going to be an accurate representation of where we stand even next week when we report to the school committee on progress. So just
okay. Yep. And on the debt service, you said, and I think that's what you said, that you included the debt service, because there's always this controversy about the debt service. And did you included the debt service in the overall number or not? Remember, we had this debate last year about operations versus the debt service, and you could separate it, which I didn't agree to. But
we put it all back together again.
it's all back together again.
Mhm.
Okay, is it there to stay?
If we want to separate it out, then the school committee can have that discussion again. But right now, it is included as one number. It is not reported separately. So that's where we are.
Okay, Member McFadden, are you all set?
For now, yeah.
Okay. If you don't mind muting yourself again, just because there's feedback. Okay, thanks. Member Donovan?
Thank you. I just, Jim, I think I heard you say that there would be a meeting of the WB Collaborative next week.
No. So we've already started to talk about options that may be available to us, and that is one of the options. We will be talking more about it and getting some feedback from our auditor on if we move forward with that process, what are the steps that we have to take? We have some ideas, but we will present those as early as next week when we meet again for the budget workshops. We'll present some different ideas for you guys.
Okay. I was just thinking, I don't know if they have in the past, but there may be many other members of the collaborative that are thinking the same thing, that they will need to draw down on these funds to assist in balancing their budgets. So I don't know if the collaborative has a mechanism for setting a cap on how much, if that's part of a formula, but,
Bob would know better than I, but
allow
I
that to be
think it has
depleted.
to do with whatever our balance is. We can't allow the balance to go below a certain point based on our own balance, but Bob can speak to that.
Yeah, there's a fund balance requirement. Basically, it's equal to 1 month's premium run out in 1 month of what would be your incurred but not paid or incurred claims. So roughly for us, that equates to about $800,000 that would have to remain in there for Exeter West Greenwich.
And I would be really cautious about that. I know there was a point where we withdrew a fairly significant amount, and it came back to bite us. If you recall, shortly thereafter, the cost of healthcare went through the roof, and and that had a domino effect on our future year budgets because we had to increase the amount that we had to pay for healthcare. So it's always a risk, and we want to learn from the mistakes that we made in prior years where we took out significant amounts. So I would not be a fan of taking a huge amount of money, which basically just creates a structural deficit that we would not be able to fill the following year. We need to be really strategic about whatever moves we make. But certainly it is worth a discussion because everything needs to be on the table this year. The circumstances are pretty dire.
Right. And you can't predict what your next year experiences will be. So I just wanted to keep in mind that, we are part of a collaborative, so that there might be a formula and a threshold for each of the participants. But if they start to see a run on the fund, they might invoke some kind of emergency measure that would limit. So I wouldn't be thinking in terms of, well, we have 3 million and we can just use what we need down to 1 million or whatever, because that may not be the case. So it's a thought for a resource, but there may be limitations that we're not even aware of yet.
Yep, fair enough.
Okay. Terry, are you all set? Okay.
Yeah.
Terry, okay, good. Member McFadden?
So as we just went past all of what we just had that discussion, when would you have the information to the school committee as to what our options are? I know I said, well, why don't you pair something? When do you think you'd have that for us, the full story? Is that next week? Week after? On the WB Collaborative, the benefit money.
Yeah, at this point, we need to wait until we get some official word from people that we've already reached out to for questions. If we have the information by next week, we'll report it. If we don't, I'll just tell you where we are in the process, and we'll have it for hopefully the following week. I mean, the budget is short. We still have a lot of time and we meet several times, so we'll just keep you up to date on every decision and every piece of information that we learn along the way.
Okay.
Okay, I don't see any other hands up. I think everybody's good.
Claudine, can I just say one other really quick
Yeah.
thing? In the draft that you got in your binders, I just want to point out that the header that is in the binder, you can see on the shared screen that I've changed it, right? It still had the old header from last year because I just keep adding on to the spreadsheet. I've corrected that. And then the percent, the 48.1% and the 51.9% is for the FY22 school year, which I've corrected here. It will be corrected on your next hard copy. But those two changes did not impact any of the numbers. It's really just the title of the section. So it's the percent change for 21-22 down here, and the header is your initial draft budget for 21-22. Those two things were wrong on the printed copy that you received.
Okay. Thanks,
Okay.
Jim.
You're welcome.
Yep, thank you. Okay. I'll give Jim a minute. You gotta take your screen down.
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go to unfinished business. We have the October 1st enrollment.
So this is the final enrollment enclosed in your packet. This is again, as the superintendent, the discussion is shown. This is the apportionment of the responsibility for the towns for funding the districts. I think we pretty much covered the migration of some of the students into the homeschool environment. Again, there are different ways to look at it as illustrated by the conversation that, NESDEC, the New England School of Economic Council, they look at it as cohort, as a superintendent reference. So you look at grade 1, then when they go to grade 2, 3, 4, our projection showed that we were increasing our population, and then March 2020 happened. So if 2022 gets us, or 2020, school year 2022 gets us back to normal, I fully expect that the enrollments will continue to climb pre-COVID.
Any questions?
Unfortunately,
comments on
that's where we are.
Okay. Thanks, Bob.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, we'll go to 2021 reentry planning update.
Okay. So really the two things we've already talked about, the testing, I actually put that in my status report, and there was some discussion about that. So we'll communicate information out to families. I already gave them one message, but as we know more details, we'll send out the message to them so they're really clear on what we're offering. And then the other thing that I wanted to talk about is budgetary. We know that there was an additional stimulus package that was passed federally. And while we have not seen anything yet official, word is that the amount that will be available to us will be anywhere from 3 to 4 times what we were seeing in previous grants. So our previous grants, there were two of them, right? We had one that was like 140 and one that was like 170. So let's just call it 150 and multiply it by 3 or 4. It's a significant amount of money. And those grants, I am not clear yet on what expenses can be applied to them, in the sense of, can you go back in time? Can we apply for the added cost for transportation for the tier that we added this year? Is that a possibility? I don't have the answer to that. What I do know is that we can use money for next school year based on needs that we're able to identify for learning loss and social emotional needs that will continue, that were caused by the pandemic, right? So that we have a number of kids who, there are gaps that have been created. They're not coming to school every single day. There is a big difference between in-person learning and at-home learning for many kids. And so one of the ways that we're allowed to use the money is to develop programs that would help to close some of those gaps and really ramp up instruction, and both academic instruction and then the social emotional supports. So there are definitely some possibilities for us. It's not going to be equivalent to the whole amount of money of the grant, but there are certainly some possibilities for us to reduce expenses from what's in the existing operating budget that's been proposed. So for example, we added an extra psychologist this year using the COVID grant. I kept that person in the budget, anticipating that the needs that we have are not going away when the school year opens up next year. So I kept that person in the budget. That's a person that was paid for out of the grant in the current year, and that person is in the operating budget for next year. Once we have the rules for extending the new stimulus grant, we are likely going to be able to include that person in the new stimulus grant, because it will extend out to the end of the FY22 school year. And that would be, yes, something that we need to address COVID in the FY22 school year, but it also will allow us to reduce that expense that I've included in the FY22 operational request. I would take that out and just move it to a grant. So those kinds of opportunities might exist as well. Again, a little at a time, right? Every little bit will get us closer to where we need to get to. That's something that's on the table as well. So I just wanted to report out on that. I don't have the number yet. I don't have the rules. It's on the agenda for the meeting with the commissioner tomorrow morning, but as soon as we have that information, that's something that you'll see a report on from myself and Bob, either through our status reports or in our regular meeting updates on the budget development process.
Okay, very good. Any questions on the re-entry updates? Everybody's good? Okay, we will move on to the capital project update and bond discussion.
Okie dokie. So, we are at a place that all the projects are done for the 2021 fiscal year. That effectively brings us to June 30th of 2021, which is the expiration date of our current memorandum of agreement on record with the Department of Education. So just for historical reference, that MOA was for over the past 5 years, $2.7 million worth of projects that were to be done. We finished, we did just about $1.5 million worth of projects over the years. Highlights would be the emergency generators at the junior, senior high school, in at Wawaloom School, which have been paid off in spades over the past year and a half, given the weather events that we've had. Particularly, I know Jeremy's on the call, really eliminates the disruption to our technology infrastructure. So we lose power, switches over to the emergency generator right away, and probably cuts the work that Jeremy and his team have to do in half by not having systems go completely down. Again, Lynham got new boilers, new roof structures, some safety measures, a playground, a lot of good things were done, but that ends on June 30th, 2021, that MOA, which essentially means we don't have an MOA unless we get the bond approved, the bond referendum approved. We're in stage 2. So for those who are new, a 4-stage process. Stage 1, kind of just let's get an idea of what we want to do some analysis about it. Stage 2 is a little more in depth, some schematic drawings about what would the project look like. Some of the folks on this call, they participated in the visioning sessions that were held in 2018. Long story short, stage 2 is now approved and we go to stage 3. And stage 3 is where they get into really designing the project and the projects that we have on the that are included in what we have a $17.4 million worth of work that's on the books. That includes soft cost and contingencies. The bond was written for 17.8 because when we started the process, the 17.8 included the Wawaloom boiler, which we just completed, and it included the safety work, which we just completed at Metcalf. So those kind of came out of the bond work, but they were included in the numbers because we had already started down that path. The good news is that the 17.8, we're able to get the COVID improvements that RIDE is going to require into the bond, by doing those, the boiler and the safety project created the dollar value that is roughly equal to the cost of the COVID added expenses for the HVAC project. So all in all, numbers you hear are 17.8 is the bond, but in the projects, in the projects, it's 17.4 million. So now we need to kind of mobilize ourselves, and we are meeting on Thursday night. I don't know. I don't want to just stop me if you need to, because I can get on a roll here. But when we initially started this conversation a couple of weeks ago, or not a couple of weeks ago, about a month ago, when we found out we were through stage 2, the superintendent, Steve Bailey, the director of facilities, we met with the architects, and we were very motivated to go down the path of getting that HVAC project done at the high school first. Come out of the gate and do that. That's a very in-depth project. I'll go on the record now. That's on the books for just under $5 million. I'm very concerned about this cost escalation in there, even though they've built it in, simply because that starts from the roofs and it goes all the way to the basement. And there's a lot of wear and tear in between 30 years. And so I'm just nervous about what they're going to find once they get into that project. Disregard that. We have the conversation. We start to talk about what would it take to get this done, during the summer months of 21 and into September of 21. So that's shovel ready on July 1st. What it would take is the architect and the engineers and all of the specialists that would be involved in that project to begin work immediately, like tomorrow. What that would require is a vote in action to free up money to pay for those services prior to the bond being approved. So if we wanted to do the HVAC project, the scope and the work involved, we need to begin engaging the professionals immediately, which would require action to free up money to pay for those services prior to the bond being approved. Do I need to stop? Because I can keep going. Because what we found out in the interim, this is, I think, a project killer for the HVAC. There's about a 16 to 20 week lead time on most of the rooftop units that would be required. The supply chain is still very disruptive. If anybody is involved in manufacturing or even just trying to get parts, the supply chain is very disrupted, and the scope of this project, there are, I believe it's 9 rooftop air conditioning units at the high school. And that's not even getting into the innards of everything down below. It's, you know, in my humble opinion, a 16 week lead time. Oof, you know, that's a lot. That's a lot. That puts us right in October. And if we don't have heat in October, your phones will be ringing off the hook, folks. So I don't know. So the alternative is to free up and go for a project that is not as intense as that. Included in the project is replacement of the Metcalf roof, replacement of the Walloon roof, move the Walloon playground. The other ones are the greenhouse construction projects over at the high school, and that would probably make more sense to do in conjunction with the science work. Jim, maybe you agree with that?
Yes, definitely.
I think, you know, a good win, a good victory for the district, for the capital project committee, you know, is worth considering. You know, one of the roof structures, I would probably go more towards Metcalf, seeing as the wind shear that comes across Route 3 just wreaks havoc on that roof, and Steve and his guys are constantly chasing that every windstorm. So that's overdue.
Okay, Bob, hold on one second. So we have 2 hands up. And I just want to ask one question before I get to Member McFadden and Mr. Kissinger. Are you talking about you said the HVAC ahead of time, we need to start that before the bond. When you're talking about these other projects, are you prioritizing once hopefully the bond gets approved, you're talking about prioritizing the projects, or do you need lead time on all these things?
I think the lead time to do the roof, if it's not the HVAC, the lead time to do the other projects would probably be not as great. And we would have to have that discussion on Thursday night, Chairperson Panday, because I don't want to, in my mind, I'm thinking, let's just say the bond happened at the ADR in April and it got approved. I want to hear from the architects that they could come up with the schematics, get the bid packet together and start on July 1. And I think maybe he could do it, because I don't think that is, you know, you're just talking about getting a roofing contractor and getting that to the street for bid. So.
Okay. Member McFadden, go ahead.
So Bob, this is my my constant question here in phase two. When do you think the $17.8 million bond would appear on the ballot?
I'm thinking that right now it's got to be in April. You need from the time that it gets enabled through the General Assembly, which it's not going to happen on the March 2nd. It's not. I've been told that that's not going to happen. So it would happen somewhere between March 2nd, March, April. I don't even know that it would make April. You need 50 days from the day it's enacted, 50 days period of time until you can have a referendum.
All right, so I'm going to just have to keep asking you questions until you say it's June 8th or whatever. All right, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, we would know when it becomes enacted. So 50 days from the date of enactment is the earliest.
Fair enough.
Okay.
All right, well, like I said, I'm going to periodically re-ask the question because that's the obvious question. All right, thanks.
Okay. Lee, go ahead. Lee Kissinger's, I'm acknowledging.
Yeah, I'm on the building committee. So what's the likelihood, Bob, that the HVAC is going to survive another 12 months?
That's the question.
That's I think that's a real viable question, and I, you know, if only I had a crystal ball. I'll say this. I'll say this.
Well, the person that should be able to answer that question is Steve.
Yeah.
He's the guy that works on it. And I think we need to get from him what the risk is. If that goes down, especially in the library area and that part of the building, I mean, you've got no heat in the middle of the winter. You're done.
Yeah.
So, and you haven't put the number out there because we talked about this back in December. I mean, you were talking about another $250,000 to get the rest of the plans done for stage 3 so that we can move forward. So, you know, what is the number that needs to be approved by the school committee such that we can get the architect to get stage 3 moving, such that whenever this thing's, I guess the green light will be the state's yes or no on March 2nd on the funding, because the question's on the state ballot. And then based upon what you just said, I don't know if it's 50 days beyond that before we can do anything.
Yeah, I'm calling that up right now.
And okay, so let's just assume then for, you know, we're March 2nd, it's yes, and then 50 days later, which would be just before May 2nd, round numbers, you know, and then we're looking at 16 weeks, which is essentially 4 months. And you're right, everything's pushed out because of the, you know, people aren't working. But let's just say that, you know, May 2nd, 4 months, materials here. So it's June, July, August, September. They've got to be ready to drop all that stuff in place and hook it up in September. And I think based upon the way your systems work, because it's basically just movement of air. So if all the ductwork's in place and all the interior work is done, and it's just a matter of dropping the rooftops in place in September and hooking them up and making sure they work, you should be done pretty quickly. Because you're not going to want to pay for a crane for more than 1 day. You're going to want to land these things in 1 day with a crane, and you're going to want to plug them all in, and you're going to want to turn them on, test them, and be done with it. So I think you can do it. It's going to require some coordination. It's going to require some work, but I think you can do it.
Yeah, I agree. I agree that there needs to be massive coordination. I think we need to have EDS talk about, you know, the room heaters and ventilation and what that impacts, because I know that there are heating coils, you know, probably a third to 2/3, or I should say a third to a half of them are probably not functional. So that's not a rebuild, that's a remove, and all of this stuff is hard walled. So I think it just, at the building committee level, we're gonna have to flesh these things out. I hear what you're saying. I mean, Steve will attest on Thursday night that he is very nervous about, you know, making the system last another year. I think we could do it. I think it is like, just, you got to put that clothespin on your nose, because you're throwing thousands of dollars at a system you're going to rip out. That's really, it doesn't make, makes none of us feel good. You know, it just makes none of us feel good.
No, I understand the timing is wrong, but you still haven't answered the question about what the number is that needs to be approved. Because if you guys.
So I don't know. We're going to talk to Lou on Thursday night. He's, in my discussion with him, he said, you know, figure 6% of the kind of the project cost to get going.
So let's say 500,000, I mean, 500,000, 5 million times 6%. What's that, 300,000?
Yeah, I came up with like 260 based on the number, so.
So are we gonna waste another 2 weeks?
No, we could make that, we can make that, that's kind of the, you know, since you bring it up, this is one of the things that we need to kind of get clear, the governance of who's going to commit to what and when. So if the building committee has the authority to commit, then they can commit on Thursday night to free up the dollars to have Lou move forward, or the architect move forward. If the building committee, if the governance of the building committee is we're not going to allow them to engage in a commitment to a contract, then every time they meet, you know, we've got to get the building committee in front of the school committee. And that's just, we're not there right now, unfortunately.
Well, and then the last monkey wrench to throw into all this is, you know, the timing couldn't be worse.
It couldn't be worse. It just absolutely,
you know, you've got to weigh the risk, not only the risk of HVAC and failure and no heat, you know, but you've got to weigh the risk of not having the support of the towns given the current budget situation this year. So I hate to say it, but this is just like the perfect storm. So, but those are things that you as a committee have to decide. So.
Okay, Member Donovan, go ahead.
I just have a funding question. Is the funding for this project predicated on the approval of one of the statewide referenda questions for March 2nd, or does this go back to previously approved state funding like 2018?
Am I on? It goes, so that funding was there, the 200, when did we vote on that a couple of years ago, the 250 million, so that's there.
Right.
The next hurdle, Terry, is the enacting legislation. And I don't think, as someone said there, you know, this is a, I read what March 2nd is about, and none of the school projects are on that one.
Okay, so this project has nothing to do with what happens on March 2nd.
No, and
okay,
I,
that's what I thought, but I thought that you
yeah,
said about that election event.
yeah. So that really, and I don't know when they're going to pick it up. And right now, you know, the state of the world is such that, you know, So this is a lot of the discussion we had. This is Karen Grande of Lock Lord, our bond counsel. Yes, this means that the vote on the bond cannot be held on March 2nd. I suggest giving some thought to you when you would like to have the referendum. You need about
Okay.
60 days from enactment to the date of the referendum.
Right.
I think, Terry, what you heard, because we originally were thinking that the legislature would take up the enabling legislation, it would be in place, and that we would be able to take advantage of the March date for the state questions, that we would be able to put the local question on at the same time that the voters were going out for the
Can't
state.
do that.
The timeline is not going to allow us to do that because the enabling legislation won't be ready in time for us to put it on the ballot for March 2nd. But that was originally what we were talking about. And that's off the table now. Those are how those dates are connected.
Yeah. So, so I'll read the email that said that, the one that I just read. So this is from Representative Price. The legislation has been drafted by my legal counsel. When the House gets back into session, I will introduce it. As of now, the House is not meeting this week, which was last week, or this week. So they're not picking it up until next week, which then sets up Karen Grande's response. If they don't pick it up until the third week of January, you're not going to have enough time to get it on March.
Got it.
Because you've got to let, it's the procedure, you know.
No, I understand.
What's that?
I understand.
Yeah.
Just refresh me on this project. Are we depending on some state reimbursement for the overall cost?
Yeah, I mean, we're still in very, very good shape as far as, you know, we're a 60% reimbursement district because of the regional. There is, we still have the opportunity to capture an additional 15% in total of additional reimbursement incentives.
So that reimbursement would come from the $250 million bond that was approved in 2018.
Correct.
Okay.
And they, you know, they continue to add and fund on an annual basis. That was just that bond for the 250. That doesn't mean they
Right.
stopped, and, you know, they're adding every year.
But these professional fees that we have been outlaying in preparation and as part of this whole process to meet the requirements for the reimbursement, the additional possible 300,000 that we're talking about tonight, this is all because we need to meet the qualifications to get that reimbursement. In order
Correct.
to
Yeah,
that
I mean,
program,
everything.
we have to outlay these funds first. We have to follow those rules, outlay the funds in order to qualify for the state reimbursement on the project.
Correct.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions?
Well, I just wanted to add one more thing. The other piece of the puzzle is if the voters don't approve it, you're outlaying funds that, you know, won't be taken advantage of. That's the
Yeah.
risk. So you pay $260,000, you have all the prints, you're ready to go. And then whenever the voters get to decide, whether it be April, May, June, they say, no, it's gone.
Yeah, that's what I was going to mention. So the timing of that approval. Bob, if we can go back, so you started talking about how the MOA expires 6/30 of 2021, which we know we've talked about that several times, but you never came full circle. So let's go back to the situation nobody wants to think about, that our MOA expires and the bond doesn't pass. So I remember at one time we talked about the building committee prioritizing some projects to create an MOA that we have, I guess, kind of in our back pocket if the bond doesn't pass, then we have this MOA that we'd be submitting to RIDE, so we don't lose reimbursements on projects, that we want to accomplish. So can you come full circle and tell me what the status of that is and what the plan is?
So, we had gone, so there are two strategies you can use. You can go for the full-on bond MOA, and then you can go for the capital project. So we're going to do kind of like what we're wrapping up.
Yep.
We went to RIDE and we said, we're going to do these capital projects. We want to be eligible for housing aid, and we're self-funding. That's expiring June 30th. During the past 2 years, we've gone down this path of we're going out to bond. And then, to your point, Chair Panday, we said, okay, we need to look at what happens if the bond doesn't pass. What do we do? And we talked about that very thing. Could we do just ask for a capital plan? Self-funded capital project plan.
Right.
And we explored that with RIDE, and we said, okay, they said, go forward with that, which is typical, a bond and a capital plan. They get approved. Still needs to get approved by the voters. Still needs to get approved by the voters, right? So we said, okay, well, what if we pull and some of the other discussion, and anybody who is out there can jump in. We said, well, the projects we need to do, we cannot self-fund. That's really been the Achilles heel.
Right.
That we need to bond. So we started down the path, and we actually paid additional tens of thousands of dollars, not hundreds of thousands, but tens of thousands of dollars to prepare to submit in September of 2020, the stage 2 submittal, and then the stage 1 submittal for an even smaller project, bond project. The stage 2 got approved. We abandoned the stage 1.
Yep.
So that's where we are.
Yep. And then,
Okay, so I thought that, hold on, Lee.
oh,
I thought that stage 1 for that second project, if you will, I thought that was our capital proposal, if you will, for the new MOA. I didn't know that got trashed, if you will. I thought we were going to move another one forward just in case.
It's not scrapped. It's kind of laying fallow because we're pursuing stage 2, and there would be cost to pursue. They're two separate things. They're not allowing us to say, I mean, there's efficiencies in saying, well, the projects in stage 1 of the smaller project, we've kind of already covered them in stage 2, but they're not allowing us to blend them. There's like, you got to treat them as two separate. So cost associated with stage 1, you want to pursue that, cost associated with stage 2. And in the meantime, we're kind of running two tracks here.
So let me just ask worst case scenario. So if the bond doesn't pass and we didn't pursue an MOA, a new MOA, are we not doing any projects for 2021, 22 because there's not going to be any reimbursement available? And then the following year, 22, 23 is when we'd submit a new MOA proposal?
We could do that. What we would do is work with RIDE. I've had these, discussions with them, just what you said, what if. Basically, what we would end up doing is we would apply to them on like an emergency status, on an emergency capital project repair. We've done them before. And basically, it's their mechanism to say, you don't have an MOA, but you have this capital need. You're not using any, quote, public money. It's not a bond. It's not financed through Rybeck. These projects would have to be self-funded by us, and you do it on an emergency basis. And then we would have to have a discussion. I mean, they would probably penalize us for not, we would definitely get our 60% because we're a regional. Would we be entitled to the other eligibility bonuses? I don't know. That bridge would have to be crossed when we got there. But I think the real issue, Chair Panday, is the roofs are $1 million projects, the playground's $1 million project, the science labs and the greenhouse are maybe $500,000 each, and then the HVAC is the big project.
Yeah.
So it's
Okay.
hard to
mean,
generate
it's
that
hard.
kind of self-funding.
No, I know. It's hard not to look at worst case scenario with the economic environment that we're in.
I
I know.
can't raise my hand because I'm the host, but as a member of the building committee, if I could speak for just a second.
Yeah, Jeremy, hold on 1 second because Lee wanted to speak and I spoke
go
over
ahead.
him. Lee, go ahead.
Yeah, the one thing that's causing us hurt here is this is dragged out so long, and we've spent so much money on phase one and phase one and phase one and then phase two and then phase two. I don't know what the total is at this point, but it's a big nut at this point.
Yeah.
And it's, I would love to say that, yeah, we're going to approve this and we're going to move forward and life's going to be great. But if we're looking at another $260,000 outlay on top of, I'm guessing about 300,000 out already.
Yeah, we've paid $250 to Lou already, to Toronto Architects already.
Okay, so I'm not too far off.
No.
So, he's $500,000 richer, and we still don't have detailed drawings. And, that's just sad at this point.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, Jeremy, go ahead.
Yeah, I remember a discussion about pursuing both the stage one and the stage two at the same time.
Yep.
And there was some feeling that would be giving the organization that makes the decision that the idea that we expect it not to be supported by the taxpayers, and it wouldn't give them a warm, fuzzy feeling about approving the stage two, which I think might have been part of the reason why we set the stage one aside. So it's ready to go, but we didn't submit it.
Right. There was.
I just think it's school committee doing its due diligence and acting in a responsible manner, because you don't know how the voters are going to react. We don't even know how our town councils are going to react. Hence our last budget season. So when we have these unknowns, it's better that we're prepared and, we're doing right by everybody. That's the way I look at it. I don't look at it, I'm in total support of it, but I'm not looking at where we don't have faith in that the voters are going to pass it. But you always got to have a backup plan. And when something is as important as this.
Yeah, I would, I think everybody's got a little bit of fatigue here, but the next step really is, is we have a stage two approval for $17.8 million worth of work. It's the payment to say, this is, now that I'll use the HVAC is approved, now get in and do all those detailed drawings, all the, the drawings that are going to be used to do the project is stage three. That's what is in front of us. So we've gotten through stage one and two. It cost us $250,000, but that was over 2 years. So 125 grand a year to get to this point. The next phase is engage the professionals, come up with the drawings to do the project, put the bid packet together. That gets approved by RIDE in stage three. It goes to the street, gets awarded. In stage four is the build, is the actual work. So I just want to be cautious. I mean, I'm as frustrated as anybody else on this Zoom call about where we are, and just, it just seems like every time we get to a good point, the world moves against us, and
Yeah.
March 2020, we're in a good spot, and now we're not. And, but I just want to be cautious. The committee, both committees have done, I think, a good job with a difficult task in front of us. We started out with this grandiose $90 million 21st century project because that's what RIDE wanted at that time. That's where everybody was. We were coming off of the Jacobs report. There was this, we need to invest in the communities. $250 million got approved. We started moving, and as we started moving, the world kept moving, and it was moving against us, unfortunately. So I just want to be careful about our message, because there's been an escalation of commitment here, and we're pretty close. And at the end of the day, that HVAC system is going to cost $5 million, no matter who does it. And it's going to cost, if soft cost and contingencies total, RIDE allows up to 20% for 3 items: the OPM, the architect fees, and contingencies. It's going to be the same numbers. It stinks. I hate it, but.
Terry, I know you have your hand up. I have just 2 more questions. So when the building committee meets, can you, are you going to talk about the owner's project manager, and if that's something that RIDE has an appetite for Steve Bailey and
Just to
the
take
district
care of,
treasurer? Yeah.
I was hoping, I hit the send button on Saturday for that, and I was hoping Joe would get back to me. I'm going to, he hasn't yet. In my email to him, I told him that the school committee the building committee would be meeting on Thursday night, and that it was a school committee agenda item. He hasn't gotten back to me. Again, it's one of those things. I'm just going to speak from the heart here for a minute. I don't think, and you guys can correct me, this community does not really appreciate another stuffed suit and a tie at the table. And sometimes I thought that was how Colliers came across. They were just another person at the table who was dipping into the till. And we're not Providence, and we're not Boston Public Schools. We're Exeter West Greenwich. And I put this in my letter to Joe. I said, this community, keeping this in-house is what the community needs. It does not need a Colliers.
Yeah, I agree.
And not only that, they live in the community, and the money stays in the community.
Yeah.
It doesn't go to Boston.
Plus, I'm also looking at $350,000.
And, you're getting, it's a greater reduced, obvious. What they're going to want to see, this is going to be the hang up. They're going to want to see a delineation between their EWG district treasurer, facilities director, in their OPM. And I laid that out, and we can discuss it and refine it if they're game. But if they're not, if it's a non-starter, another community did it. And what they did is they were lucky. They got a retiring facilities director. He was retiring, and he said, well, I'll stay on and do it. And they said, okay, if you'll stay, if they worked it out so that it was in Warwick, they pay him to stay on, and he's the OPM, but essentially the school district is paying him, but he retired from his facilities director. I'm just putting a little different spin on it, like they don't need to retire.
Okay. And then my last question is, the school committee approved funds for the stages. You were talking about, does the school committee need to approve the stage 3 funding, or the building committee? So we did assign funds for the stages. So, we have to have stage 3 done. We have to get, there's kind of not an option. So is it something that, you need to bring it back before school committee, or the funds are already sitting there? We already approved the funds for the projects and the building committee can move forward.
I want to say that I'm looking at my other screen. Maybe someone on the committee can recall when we approved the funding, we didn't use all the funding that we freed up the last time. The final what do you got, Lee?
We capped the stage 2 at $1 amount, and we may not have used it all, but we did not. To my knowledge, there's no discussion beyond stage 2.
Okay, that was just for stage 2. Okay, all right. Okay, Member Donovan, go ahead.
Thank you. I apologize if this is belaboring. This is half question. This is half rant. And I'm sure everybody feels the same way.
Yeah.
I know that, we can only guess at how the communities will receive this as each day's events unfold and facing new challenges. But it's not only whether or not they support it, it's whether or not they can take on the additional debt. If we obligate to debt, they obligate to debt, and
Yep.
they may, be well beyond the threshold. There's just so much. This is just so much money. But this is, if that HVAC system fails, that's a catastrophic event. And we're following all the rules. We're following the application process to the T. We're shelling out all the advance money to make sure that we meet all the requirements. But if you have a catastrophic event, say this wasn't even in play, is there funding? Is there some kind of support on the federal or the state level when a school district has that kind of catastrophic event where they just can't go into debt for it, or they can't go into debt for the whole nut? And I'm also thinking about, with the study, about the hazard studies for all of the school districts throughout the state, and the urban districts who have extreme needs. Are they doing this? Are they laying out all this advance money? Do they have it? Can they obligate their municipality to that additional debt? Aren't they at their ceiling? How does this work for people like us that follow the rules, that are facing a catastrophic event?
I can just tell you anecdotally, but also just from talking with, a lot of people are in our situation. That's really, to make it simple, there are people who are at the same point where we are. It's like everything is in place, they're playing by the rules, but the world is moving against us economically, and can they take on the debt? And there's no there's no short answer to it. I would think if we had a catastrophic event, we would have to apply, number one, under the emergency status, to have the, the project eligible for the housing aid reimbursement. But it would not be out of the realm for them to say, you identified this back in 2018. It's 2021. What took you so long? You need to.
Their process.
They would say you need to issue bond anticipation notes. Go to your bank, get some bond anticipation notes, get your project going, and then go to bond. I could be totally wrong, Terry, but I know historically that is what has happened in the district. And I know it predates all of us. And I know that that
I think in a nutshell, we would be one of the last communities that got free money if we had that kind of a catastrophic event happen. They'd tell us we could afford it, figure it out. That's what would happen. So that's really the dilemma that we have. You know, it seems like every time we have the discussion, there's something new that's occurred that makes the discussion more difficult. But at the same time, every day that goes by, that system is a day older and it's a day closer to dying. And when that happens, it's going to have to be repaired. And I'd rather get it repaired with 75% reimbursement than 60% reimbursement on a $5 or $6 million project, because that amounts to a lot of money.
Yeah.
Right.
That's where I am.
I know Member McFadden has a question. Hold on, Paul, 1 second. I just want to, in order to help sell this whole thing, because I think we're going to need all of our ducks in a row. What I'd like to see happen before our joint meeting is to put in a capital request in our budget, an amount as to what the HVAC system will cost. And if that had to go before the taxpayers at our ADR, what the impact would be on the two towns. And show that, and then show, then we know, and the implications of if we go to bond. And I know the two towns, the councils, showed support with their letter, but every day things change. So I just want to have that number visible on a piece of paper. This will be what we'd have to present to the two towns and put on the ADR for the HVAC, which is going to fail soon. Or this is the impact if we go to bond, and maybe that will help sell the bond. It's just I literally just thought of it and just throwing it out there because it's not going to look pretty. Bob, can you and Jim do that?
We could, but are you talking for $5 million project as a capital request?
Well, whatever you think we would need to ask the taxpayers for to fund the project if we didn't get the bond approved. I'm not saying we're going to put it on there, but
I mean,
I think I'm just saying to show it as what are other options?
Yeah, so when we do the capital request, if you're looking at the summary page, it's the operations is 34 million. Then below that would be capital request. And there are two different resolutions at the ADR.
Correct. And we haven't asked for capital probably in about, I don't know, 10 years. Yeah. I'm not saying we're going to do it. I just want to show the visual. Because if everything fails and the bond doesn't pass, we're all going to have to be figuring out how this is going to get paid for. So I'm just saying that might help us pass the bond. I'm just kind of talking out loud. It's going to be ugly.
Yeah, there you go.
Paul, you're on the phone. Just so you know, Jim is actually inputting my request into the spreadsheet right now.
So this is what I think you're talking about, right? I added a $5 million capital request.
Yep. Yep.
That's what happened.
So that should be one of the sheets that gets presented, because who's paying for the HVAC if the bond doesn't get approved? Okay, Member McFadden, go ahead. You had a question.
Was that me? Did you just say that I could talk?
Go ahead.
All right. So I know we talked about catastrophic failure, and I think this whole conversation is kind of hypothetical, but if, we had a catastrophic failure that was a concern of multiple people, I mean, the towns would be obligated to create a supplemental budget, right, to get it done, whatever it would take to restore service to the building, right? They're pretty much under the obligation for a supplemental budget. And if that means like we go at private to get the bond out there, then they gotta, it's very financially inconvenient, but you know, trust me, it won't last long because the state's going to come around and say, you got to get that facility up. So the good question, and it's a fair scenario that was talked about, but given the uncertainties, I don't think it's unreasonable for Bob in his spare time, should a catastrophic failure occur, to map out for us just exactly how would we adapt to that. So let's just say, you know, we're just not prepared. We're not in a position for whatever number of reasons to go forward with the engineering at this point, and there is a catastrophic failure. I don't think I would be uninterested, or is that a double negative? I think I would be interested to know just exactly what the contingency plan is to get the financing in place to get the building back up in service, because I can't imagine that the state's going to let you to just go for months without that facility up and running. So there'd be some kind of, like I said, you know, when we run out of money, I believe it's in the charter that we can submit a supplemental budget to address unanticipated large issues, and whether we like it or not, it may not be convenient. We may be obligated to do that, or the towns would be obligated to do that. And, you know, the consequences of that are not financially very attractive. So I just want to make sure if that's the case or not, Bob, since we are talking about that, right? Mm-hmm. Did I bore you? Did I put you to sleep, Bob?
No, not you. Your golden-throated, warbling voice keeps me awake at night.
Sure. Okay. Good. But anyway, I think the conversation was good, but I think it's going a little long. I was kind of hoping we could come to some conclusion, but that would be an outstanding point that I think is worth addressing, Bob, is, hey, what if something does go wrong? What do we do? Do we get temporary heating service out there? You know, which is possible. Get a trailer out there blowing heat into the building, and then, you know, go to the towns for a supplemental bond or a supplemental a raising of funds to support a bond. You know what I mean? So does that sound unreasonable? You can say yes. It's only me, Bob.
No, I think
no?
I think that is the discussion. All right, what's our fallback? Not fallback position, but what would be the mechanism if we did it? The thing that we have to understand is that we're talking about the junior, senior high. It is zoned. It is different segmentation. So different areas could fail, and other areas could be up and running. So when we talk about a catastrophic failure, it's not like that would have to be the boiler, and those are okay. Knock on wood. So it would be in the different zones that would have the rooftop unit failure or somewhere along within that system. But we would have to manage
which
that.
means it's temporary service, and you're bringing, you know, temporary piping in, you know, to get the heat into the place. You're blowing it in from the outside, right? I mean, we've seen it everywhere. You know, I think we even had temporary service for a while at Wallalome decades ago. So, I mean, that's, you know, we're not crazy about this, but, you know, I just like to know that, you know, you guys have that in your pocket, that you're not caught flat-footed, that if something happened like you just described, you know, here comes the supplemental budget, because, you know, we need to get things going. And the supplemental budget is always an option open to us. In other words, you know, if you run out of money, right, There's two ways of procuring money for our school system. It's the traditional budget, and then the second method is the supplemental budget. Something unanticipated has happened, and you go back to the towns asking for more money, which I don't think in my lifetime here that's happened. But anyway, all right. Sorry. Hopefully this conversation's coming to a close soon. Thank you.
Member Donovan, did you have a question? Your hand is up. I don't know if it was up from before.
It was just up from before. I couldn't look.
Okay, thanks. Okay. I think we covered everything in that conversation. Jim, Bob, you have anything else to add?
No.
Good? You're good? Okay. All right. Okay, we have important dates and meetings. Let's see, we have Wednesday, January 20th. We have our budget workshop. Tuesday, January 26th, we have school committee meeting. Thursday, January 28th, we have our joint meeting with the towns on the budget. February 9th, school committee. February 23rd, school committee and budget adoption. Okay. I think that should do it. Jim, anything to add?
No, we covered a lot.
Yes, we did. Okay, good. All right. So I just need a motion to adjourn.
Motion moved.
Member Patillo made a motion to adjourn. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second, Member Allen. Okay, roll call vote. Member Donovan.
Aye.
Member Green.
Aye.
Member Allen.
Aye.
Member Cadden.
Aye.
Member Patillo.
Aye.
And Member Monroe.
Aye.
Okay, my motion carries. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank
You
Thank you.
too.
Thank you.